Hello everyone, my name is Matt Ladder and today I'd like to show you something amazing. So, first up, who am I? I'm a gamer, I'm a role-playing gamer, I'm a fantasy nerd, I read books, I love books, and basically I live for stories. So, even when I was young I started doing maps. All the time. Just a little kid drawing maps on paper. Nothing great, but hey, it's always been a hobby of mine. So, what I'm going to show you today has to do with exactly that, maps. I've done maps for the last 10 plus years, somewhat semi-professionally you could say. I do maps in Photoshop, I do maps in Illustrator, Adobe Illustrator for example, more informative space-based maps, you know, with sectors and stuff like that, and planets here, systems there, all the good stuff. I do a lot of fantasy maps in Photoshop, as I mentioned, and today I want to show you a tool I've been watching for the last couple of years. You can see it here on the screen. The tool is named Inkarnate. So, what is Inkarnate? Inkarnate is a browser-based, free, easy-to-use map-making toolset. Since very recently, they also have a paid service, a subscription service, Inkarnate Pro. And I want to show you basically what does Inkarnate do and why you should care if you like to do maps. So, as I mentioned, let's quickly go over the very basic details here. Inkarnate has a free mode and a paid subscription mode. The free mode has around 100 icons and brushes you can use to design your maps, a bunch of textures, and all the tools that subscription mode has as well. The big difference for subscription mode is that it has over 500 of those icons and brushes. A lot more, a whole lot of good stuff in there. Not everything all that useful depending on what you do, but I think it's a solid baseline and I'm pretty sure they're gonna expand on that in the future. The second big difference, and what made me really go for a subscription mode at the moment I saw it was available, is that it has double the map size. You can't really choose the map size, that's one of the big downsides of Inkarnate. It has a preset size and you need to work with that. That's a bit of a downside to some people, but generally it shouldn't matter too much, I guess. So let me show you real quick what you can do. So I've prepared a few things. Let's start with this over here. This is more of a large-scale world map, you could say. There's a whole bunch of mountains. This is far up in the north of a fantasy world I created. Bunch of cities, a dragon flying about, whole lot of other things. This is one of the, well, overland maps, far away, zoomed out. This here is supposed to be a fair bit close up. You can see the individual very small villages as icons denoted, the large chains of mountains, whole lot of trees, bunch of rivers going into one massive river. Hopefully you like it. So what you can also do is this. Especially with Pro mode. There's a whole bunch of tool sets and icons to create city and village maps, and this is just a quick run through together in maybe 15 minutes or so maximum. Not that much work, but it already looks pretty decent, and if you're playing role-playing games and slap this on your tabletop, virtual or real, your players might be very happy. I know certainly mine are. So these are just some of the things you can do. There's a whole lot more, and essentially, as you can see, I've been doing a fair bit of work in that wonderful tool. So let's actually go over how to deal with Inkarnate. So we're gonna create a new map. I'm gonna actually take the Pro size for now. And the first thing that will ever happen, it needs to load the icons. You can see over here, 509 icons in total for the Pro version. The normal one has around 100 or so, if I remember correctly. So, again, how do you use this tool? To the left is where your tool sets are. Basically, in a very short and quick, dirty overview, you have the Sculpt tool, which allows you to just paint in land masses, or, you know, delete them. And let's go. So the next tool we have is basically the texturing tool. The brush, you can select your texture. Needs to load for a moment here. As you can see, there's a fair few textures for all manner of things. You just need to find out it works for you and your style. I have a set of these textures I use, and most importantly, you can import your own. So that's always handy. So basically, same as before, you can just brush things in. You can select the size, and you can select the softness of your brush in case you want a really hard transition. Let's get that up to 1 again. You can also, by the way, select which brush shape you want. So if you're one of those people who really likes hex maps, yeah, you are covered. Same thing applies to the sculpt tool, so you can just go ahead and create very beautiful hex maps with some added detail in there. So beyond the brush tool, we have the object tool. The object tool is where the whole tool set begins to shine, because they have a metric ton of really awesome artwork in here. Probably and honestly speaking, there's probably not everything in there that you'll ever need, but yeah, it's more than enough for most purposes, I'd say. And as I mentioned before, I think this is a baseline they start working from. There's gonna be more stuff coming down the line, I think. So yeah, you just select what you want. Say you want a tower, and then you have it at your cursor. You can select the scale, make it very tiny, or make it the largest tower in the world map, and slap it in. So what you can do as well, it's marked right now, you can move it about if your mouse is within the circle. If it's outside of the yellow circle, you can basically just, you know, what's the word again? Rotate it. Rotate. Hard word. So what you can also do, if you have multiple icons, you can go over here to the select mode and just select, and as before, move around, rotate. You also have that wonderful little thing up here, the icon, the 3 lines. You can click on it and you can delete, you can push to front, push to back, or add a node. So if you, for example, let's take a big tent. You have a big tent and they overlap. You can decide which one is supposed to be in the front, which in the back. We push the tent back, and there we go. Usually though, the toolset is fairly nice about understanding what is automatically in the back and what is automatically in the front. So that's something you should only have to worry about occasionally for some special cases. So let's delete all that really quick. So next up we have the pattern tool. That's basically similar to the object tool, except that it deals with more repetitive things. Trees, mountains, a lot of buildings. So let's take one of the normal trees, go down in size a bit, and you can just click and drag and it'll paint in wonderful, beautiful forests. And that will very quickly, all on its own, look relatively nice. Most of all, because if we take a closer look, there's a fair bit of variation in there. Not overly much, there's like 4 or 5 maybe different trees in there, but yeah, I think actually a few more maybe. But yeah, generally speaking, there's variety. It'll automatically randomly pull from that variety, and you can just paint along and have nice, wonderful forests going. So there we go, Forested Island. Like before, you can select the scale, and you can also go into a selection mode. Difference here, we cannot move or rotate these icons. Can't drag them. Only things you can do is select delete here. So be a bit mindful of your placement with the pattern tool. Next up, we have the text tool. The text tool allows you to just place text, obviously. So we click here, we enter Forest Island. We have a few fonts to select from. Some of you may know some of them, at least the Trajan Pro is fairly well known. You can select the size, you can select whether it's bolded or not. Usually bolded is better. You can select the color of the text and you can select the color of the shadow. That's that. Same thing as before, you can select and then have full access to everything again. For example, if you want to rename it into Forest Isle. Works just as easily. Next up, we have the nodes tool. You can just place nodes and just info goes here. So these are basically just, yeah, nodes for yourself. Very handy to have, and you can just move them about. So yeah, basically location markers, you could say. Very important, before I forget, the nodes actually don't show up in the other modes. It's just, well, location markers for yourself, so to speak, to be more clear. Next up then, we have the grid. As you saw earlier, when we went into hex painting mode, it automatically overlaid the hex grid. We can select between basically two types of grids, the square and the hex. We can select the opacity of the lines, fading in and out here. We can select the size of the grid, the width of the individual grid things. We can select the color and the shadow, as before. Fairly nice if you want to use it. Personally, I don't think I ever use the grids. I don't personally like them. Well, to be quick, next up we have zoom. It should be self-explanatory, I guess. You have the settings, which is where you enter the title and the description for your map, the save button, which will save your file, and most importantly, the export. The export will save your map out as a JPEG to your local hard disk drive, and then you can use it and further enhance it if you have, for example, access to Photoshop. And yeah, that's basically the quick overview of the tools. So what I'd like to do is basically go over with you once, give you a quick view on how to do some things, some very basic tips and tricks, and if this is interesting to you, let me know in the comments down below or just by watching, clicking thumbs up. And if there's an interest, I may go ahead and produce some more in-depth videos on how to do that stuff. So first of all, let's go out and create a completely fresh map. Since it's already loaded before, as you saw, the whole loading process was very fast. If you have Incarnate closed for longer than a few minutes, it usually deloads the icons. So, basically, what you want to do first when you start out creating a map is basically slap down the major landmasses. I usually start with a somewhat sizable brush and just paint in the rough lines where I want landmasses to be. Details come later. So, let's say this is the northern tip of a continent, so something along those lines works. So, we paint in the insides. And then I usually go down to a relatively small sculpting size. Somewhere between 10 and 20 is usually where I go. Had a quick thing there, sorry. So, next up, we basically start doing the coastlines over again. You can go vastly smaller with the sculpting. I personally like about this size, and you just roughly draw along the coastline and wiggle your mouse here and there. Sometimes just, you know, break out a little, create interesting formations in your coastline. And once you've got this stuff down, you can be relatively fast. Paint in what's left over from the map. Zoom upwards and we continue. And this is just a bit of a creative process. Just paint where you feel, you know. Interesting landscapes should predominate if you want. You can also just go fairly bland depending on what you want. Like, not every location on the map is obviously a Grand Canyon. Not everything is the Pyramids of Giza, a massive desert, you know. Choose what you need, go with that. If you have no idea what to go with, just, you know, go with the flow. That's what I do. Okay, coastlines are getting a lot more pleasant to look at. And we're down here at the last spot. So there's also a fair note, if you want relatively hard and sharp edges. Say for example, this should go out and really be an edge, so to speak. You need to do that with the subtract tool, since even the smallest add brush will still lead to a fairly, you know, rounded edge, so to speak. So let's go with that. Let's zoom in. Let's sharpen this thing up here. So instead we take the subtract, we up the size a little bit, and then there we go. Let's disrupt that very straight, narrow line here. There, much better. So that's how you create very, very sharp edges. So let's zoom out again, and now we'll come to the whole texturing part. As I mentioned before, this is the northern tip of a landscape, so let's start with some wonderful snow. Say the cold winds are blowing in from the top. Yeah, from the top right primarily. So we leave a fair bit of that, well, plains area, add a whole bunch of grasslands close to the coasts. A bit more fertile, bright grass green near the western coast here. And sure, let's add in some fairly brown areas here. This is gonna be a bit of rougher terrain. And before long, let's consider one of these for a bit of swamp. There. So this step, what I do is just very, very roughly paint in where I want to have which biome, so to speak. Details and what else, where, details, corrections, all comes later. So next point, we're gonna start with the pattern tool. We're gonna skip the object tool, since what I first want to do is place major landmarks in the sense of natural geography. We're gonna paint in some major forests, we're gonna, most of all, importantly, paint in some mountains, some hills, and only then I usually go back to the object tool and place key cities, interesting locations, that kind of stuff. So, we're gonna go ahead, take my personal favorite, the Rocky Mountain pattern. Fair note, this is only available in the Pro mode, but frankly, the normal mountains are also fairly beautiful. I usually go down to a size of about 50 for mountains and other stuff like that. And yeah, for example, just painting in that stuff already looks pretty decent. Go down the size another bit, you know, add some foothills, some smaller mountains, that kind of stuff. So that looks beautiful all by itself, but as I mentioned before, I'm gonna pick the wonderful Rocky Mountain texture, pattern, not texture, since I really, really like that one. It flows a lot nicer, as you can see. That's one of the perks of the whole Pro thing. Some of the icons are just straight up better. So this is gonna be a large, massive mountain spire. There we go. Looks nice already. So, we have divided the areas very roughly. Let's go ahead, go back to the brushes, paint in some more green over here. Essentially that whole area over here is quite fertile, quite rich in resources. Very nice place to be. Then we're going to pick something a bit more sandy. The area between those hills here is fairly dry and arid. Same as the foothills over here. And to differentiate that a bit more from the green land around it, we're gonna go ahead and paint in some more of the just base texture. Not sure what to call it at the moment. So now we know where our mountains are. That means we can start painting in some of the trees. So, you know what? Let's first do something else. Namely, we're gonna go with a river. So rivers should be between 10 and 20 size if you're gonna go for a style similar to mine. 11 should work here fine. So essentially my idea is the swamp here gathers the water, drains into a single river, and that single river snakes down along the mountains here, drawing some more water, then winds up and into a small bay. There we go. So now, since we have a swamp that drains, we can just create some more additional lines that just flow into it. May look weird at first, but frankly, once we're done with a bunch more of the swamp trees, the swamp ferns adding in, it'll look fairly nice, at least in my experience. So if we zoom out again, you can already see, yeah, this looks pretty nice. So back in we go. We're gonna pick ourselves the swamp fronds and just liberally paint them everywhere. Feel free to just paint them over the water as well. I mean, a lot of swamp plants obviously grow in the water as well. Cluster some together very tightly, others are spread about very far. And then we go to the swamp trees and likewise just paint them in. Note that these pattern brushes, pattern icons block each other in a certain way to prevent just layering them atop one another. So in this case, some areas like down here where there's a lot of fronds, we can't paint a lot of the trees. But hey, I mean, come on, this looks already pretty decent. So, let's continue with a bit of forest. Let's just say down here the south side of the river is fairly rich in trees. Essentially the forest just merges into the swamp seamlessly, that's why we mix some of the trees here. And there we go. Just wave around, paint it in, keep the mouse clicked or clicking, and then it just tapers off a bit into the plains. A bit more of a tighter cluster here. And that's already fairly decent, so let's actually say down here another bit of forest that spills over into another map. Up here we add some more. Beautiful. Okay, and already this part here looks fairly healthy and alive. So next up, let's go over here. The dry areas. So let's start with a few pines. Let's not be very liberal with them, just a few here and there. Then we gotta go to the dead trees, and down in that gorge we're just gonna plant a few of those. Gives a bit of an ominous look. Next up we gotta decide how wastelandy do we want the northern tip here to be. So basically what I would do is just around the coast over here and along the mountains there's a bit more of vegetation, snowy pines, and farther up north there's just some dead trees and maybe a few barren hills. So let's go with the snow pines and just liberally add them about. Bit of a forest over here. Yeah, let's just make this entire cove here fairly forested. There we go. Only a few trees up there. A whole bunch here. There we go. Doesn't look all shabby, I'd say. So next up, as mentioned, we're gonna consider adding some of the barren hills. With those, I usually need to go a fair bit lower. Yeah, there's some very sizable brushes in there. That actually overlaps a bit, but you know what? I think we can do something with that. So let's zoom in some more, go over here, just add the ground we need, brush in the snow, and beautiful. So we go back to the trees, about 50% as before, and slap in some more. Essentially, that hill provides a bit of a windbreak for the forest. More trees can grow. And yeah, beautiful. Let's add a few more up here for good measure. And I'd honestly say we'll leave it at that. We have a very barren frozen tip over here. a bit of hills, fair bit of snowy forest. So let's skip over to the lower part over here. So what do we want here? Let's just take a look. I think we're just gonna go with some very sparse trees. So on the green we have a lot more obviously, but down here very few. We're gonna add some interesting landmarks by the object tool later. But that should largely do it. So add a few more snow pines over here real quick for good measure. And do we have anything to put into the wasteland area here? We could go again with some dead trees, and I think we'll do that. But let's actually go ahead, get the barren hills, and basically just close this area off some more. Okay, that should work. That explains why the snow isn't drifting in here. And then, as mentioned before, we're gonna get some dead trees. Slap some in here and there. Don't go overboard. And I'd say we're done with the basic vegetation everywhere. So it's already looking to be coming alive here. Very beautiful already, I feel. So let's start with the civilization side over here. I've decided, essentially, let me zoom out again. The north is largely unpopulated. There's going to be a few nomadic tribes roaming about. Likewise, the wasteland area here, there's a bunch of ruins probably, maybe a wizard tower, a dragon flying above, something like that. And over here, in this area, I'll probably place a bit of a dwarven presence. And over here, as mentioned, this is going to be the civilized part of the world. Humans, essentially. So let's go ahead and place our principal settlement. As you can see, there's a literal ton of stuff to choose from. So you just need to get to know them all over time. It's gonna take a while if you're using the tool to know where is what, but after a couple hours you're gonna get the knack of it. So we're gonna select our capital, and right now it's fairly large. Usually I go around 35% or so for city icons, and the rest just follows along. So let's place it nicely over here. There we go. So what we want now, we just want to have it spill over a bit more. You know, it's a metropolis, it's a ginormous city. So under the pattern brush we have various building brushes. The desert buildings, dwarven, the farm buildings, market stalls, 2 town variants and a village. I'm gonna go with the town variant, put it all the way down, and just paint a little bit. Over here, that house goes a fair bit into the water, so let's delete it. And if we zoom out again, it'll actually look pretty decent. Don't worry overly much about some minor inconsistencies, like the buildings inside and the buildings outside having different size. You can obviously be a fair bit more detailed, you know, but I personally take these maps as a very slight abstraction anyways, so for me that works. So next up, let's place down another icon. So let's say there's marauding tribes and stuff farther up north, and the whole place here needs a bit of protection. So we're gonna look about, and there is a fortress. Let's zoom back up a bit, and let's place it here. And as I mentioned before, the program is fairly smart about placement, what is in front, what is in back. You can see the tree automatically places itself in front, and the mountain in the back. So that's pretty helpful. Okay, so we have that now. Let's go ahead, place maybe a second city, something smaller. Let's scroll up again. City 01, that looks nice. Over here near the forest, looks good enough for me. And then we're gonna go place some more villages. I personally just use the village or town brushes to place some singular buildings or ones and twos here and there to denote small villages. And as you can see, that looks fairly decent, I would argue. And there we go. That's the human presence. What we can do now is look for some embellishment symbols, you know, stuff to make it all come more alive. So let's consider what we need. We could use a dock. So let's scale it down. Place it in front of the city. And since we have dock, we also need ships. So let's go scroll down, get the ships in, scale it up a fair bit. There we go. If you zoom out again, it's already looking like there's a whole bit of life over here. So, anything else we want to place in? Let's take a very rough and quick look about. We could place a wizard tower of sorts, and you know what? Let's do that. A wizard tower near the swamp. Let's reduce the size a tiny bit. And over here you can see the swamp front pushed itself in front. That means we can just go and push the front, and that small tidbit is vanished. Okay, we have a wizard tower, we have a fortress, 2 cities, a bunch of minor villages, and a ship sailing about. And where there's ships sailing about, you know there also needs to be some dangerous waters. Wouldn't want them to get complacent, so let's put in a sea serpent. And while we're at it, let's make it sizable. There we go. Ships won't go there, for sure. So, next up, we're gonna go to our object tool again. We're gonna select actually an orc citadel. Let's be fairly classic here. Let's reduce the size. A fair bit more. That works. And let's add an orc town. There we go. Sorry. Looks a lot better already. So now there's a solid reason for a fortress in the gap here. It's protecting the civilized lands from the wild orcs. Depending on what kind of story you like, I like to mix it up. Good orcs, bad orcs, whole lot of shades of grey. And it doesn't need to be formulaic after all. So, as mentioned before, up the north we don't want much. Largely what I want is the tents. So let's place one over here. You know, there's forests, so the people there can hunt, get hides, you know, keep safe in the winter, forage a bit. Take the second variant of tent, slap it in here. Much more protected from the cold winds, probably. And the frozen north up here we'll just leave. And I think there's a tiny bit of land I didn't paint in. Yep. Problem solved. Which reminds me, there's also that bit over here. And it's gone. Okay, so let's go to the wastelands. Orcs or nomads? That's a big question here. I think I'm gonna place another orc town. Fairly deep inside here. And this place has once been prosperous and settled, but has been torn to shreds and ruin in the past. So let's just add a few ruins. Depending on what you do these maps, like me, they may be spaces for your role-playing game parties to explore, or if you're more writing short stories, novels, whatever have you, you can use it obviously as very solid story leads. And let's actually go ahead, select the tower. Oh, we're already all the way in the bottom. So let's place a tower over here. And right next to it, another couple of village huts. I think they maybe... Nah, they come Yeah, size-wise, it's fairly okay. So this out here, some humans live here, the dwarves will come in a moment, and they have this tower here to look out and protect against the encroaching hordes if they ever come. Let's add some more interesting bits to the plains here, namely some chasm. Nice and large, you know, it splits the plain nearly in two. What lurks below there, entirely up to you, obviously. Let's add an ominous cave nearby. And yeah, this one needs to be fairly small. There we go. And now we come, lastly, to the dwarves. Just need to find them again. There we go. The Dwarven Mine, the Dwarven Farm, and the Dwarven Tower. That's at the moment all we have for dwarves, in addition to a dwarf building brush. You'll see that in a few moments, so let's make this somewhat sizable. This is supposed to be the entrance into a mighty citadel under the ground. There we go. The dwarves have some farms above ground as well here. Can't always just lift off mushrooms, you know. And to protect the whole thing, there's gonna be 2 towers defending against all that may come. Let's add some more dead trees here real quick to spruce up the wasteland area here. There. And we are essentially done. This is my process in doing a relatively quick and dirty map. So let's go ahead, save it out real quick. Oops. Over here. Okay, and if you have downloaded the Pro Size map, you can see on 100% zoom, there's a fair bit of size to it. You can see all the minor details we placed. There's a lot of beautiful stuff in there. It just looks good. If you take yourself a fair bit more time, you can go into very, very great detail, add a lot of beautiful stuff, and just keep expanding. There's one more thing, sorry, I want to show you, namely the text tool. So let's go here. Let's call this place Irian. Just a quick look at the text tool. Place a new one over here. The city of Erisat. And just as I mentioned before, just click and drag, you can rotate things. And that's basically how you use the text tool. So, there's something else I want to show you. So, one of the big problems, obviously, is that Incarnate, even with the Pro Size maps, is limited in what you can do map-wise. But, if you know Photoshop, at least a little bit, there's options. Let me show you. This here is a project I've started about a week and a half ago, maybe. Essentially, my role-playing game group looked for something new to play, and we decided to give Dungeon World a try. Dungeon World captured our imagination, it flowed really nice, and we decided to stick with it. And since we first played, I did a whole lot of work. I started making the map up here together with my players, and then I just decided, you know what, let's keep going. I'll just assemble those maps in Photoshop. And as you can see, if you know what you're doing, it works out. And I think it looks fairly beautiful. There's a few discrepancies here and there, obviously. The matching of edges is not always extremely clean. The icons at the edges can be problematic. And if I just take off the black grid, you can see they don't always fit perfectly. That's why I have the grid in the first place. But that's something I can easily show you how to do. And at the moment, this here is my campaign map. And since I was finished and decided, hey, I'm bored, what else to do? I decided to go deeper still. And honestly, I think, especially in this larger format, the maps begin to look really, really amazingly great. So that's a quick look at Inkarnate. As I mentioned before, just check it out yourself. Inkarnate.com. You can create a completely free account, create some maps, check it out, and if you like it, go for Incarnate Pro. Incarnate Pro then, I don't think I can navigate there at the moment, since I already have one. A Prime account that is. Doesn't seem so. So anyways, yeah, Incarnate Pro, essentially, either, if I remember correctly, it's $5 a month, if you go by a month-by-month payment scheme, or if you wanna do it like me and drop a small bunch of cash for the entire year, it's $25. Less than half the price, so if you like mapping, even just every couple of weeks, give it a try, consider doing it. I certainly have not regretted it, as you can very clearly see here. And as also mentioned before, if you're interested in learning more, in going into detail, you know, just exploring the whole toolset a bit more in depth, how I make my maps maybe, stuff like that, you can just let me know. I'm more than interested in producing these videos, but you know, if nobody's watching them, why do them? So if you like this, if you watch this, if you think, hey, this guy's onto something, I want to know more, let me know. I'll do more videos. Also, on a note to the end, I do have a Discord server for my mapping efforts. You can join there. I'll link it down below. Feel free to be there, to ask around. I'm showcasing over there not just my Incarnate maps, but also other things. My Photoshop maps, my InDesign maps. Not InDesign, sorry, Illustrator. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff over there. Feel free to be there. You're welcome. And yeah, with all that said, thanks for watching. Hope to see you soon. Bye bye.